Hi, I'm Ian Sun, and I'm from British Columbia, Canada.
And I'm Hyunjin Shin. I'm also from BC, Canada.
And today we'd like to... Hey, wait a minute. Isn't this made of paper?
You're right.
You know, I hear 50 billion of these are used every year, and a single tree can only make 2,500 of these? How many trees is that?
I got you. Let's just use the Fourier series to calculate that.
You know, you gotta stop saying dumb stuff like that. No, just divide 50 billion by 2,500.
All right, let me grab my TI-84 plus CE calculator.
Why do you have a calculator?
Holy moly, Jesus Christ, that's 20 million trees for
20
cups
million? That's so much. Wait, that's a massacre. Wait, if we use that much for cups, then how much do we use in our everyday lives?
I know, right? All the tables are wood, the floor is wood, the countless fences are wood, and even baseball, my favorite sport, uses a lot of wood.
Is this just the consumer's fault? Can all the blame be placed on us?
Yeah, why don't producers and companies like us take some responsibility?
You know, I hear that companies worldwide cut down 15 billion trees every year, but only replant 1.2 billion? Now, because of that, the Amazon and even BC's forestry is screwed.
That's absolute insanity. That must mean that there is a serious negative externality since the marginal social cost exceeds the marginal private cost.
You know what? Why don't we build a private company where we maximize profit and then minimize this negative externality?
That's a great idea. Let's do that.
And so today, we'd like to introduce to you WEA, the World Environmental Agency.
But what exactly is WEA? WEA will be a company that revolutionizes regulation of the environment, protecting already endangered plant species and generate profit while saving the world.
WEA will initially concentrate its efforts on the logging industry in BC. But how may you ask, is this possible? Well, the main components of this company will come twofold: regulatory taxation and a tradable permit system.
The former is what will primarily be restricting the logging industry. The latter acts as a basis of the services. Both of these components will work in tandem with the government.
Let's quickly delve into just a little more detail on each of these components. WEA will institute a strict tax unique to different companies. The amount taxed will be proportional to the extent with which a company exceeds their predetermined limits.
These taxes will be calculated by an algorithm developed by WEA based on a company's likeliness to exceed their limits.
Next comes a tradable permit system. As mentioned prior, there will be limits set for the companies on the amount of carbon or greenhouse gas they are allowed to emit. This limit will be determined by the same algorithm that finds the tax.
Furthermore, the limits can be traded between companies. Thus, for example, a company that is far from reaching the limit may sell their surplus to a different company they may have already exceeded or intended on exceeding their limits. Now, let's elaborate on the algorithm mentioned before.
The algorithm will be developed in-house at WEA. It will involve a complex network of surveillance drones that will analyze the environmental practices of different companies.
The algorithms will then utilize the collected data to determine the company's individual limits and taxes.
Next comes a mobile app developed and operated by WEA. This app will serve two primary purposes: providing information to the public and collecting public investments.
All data collected by WEA will be published annually to the app for all users to access. However, individuals who invest in WEA will receive a more comprehensive monthly report.
Investors may contribute anywhere from $1 to $1,000 directly through the app. However, larger investments will require communication with the finance department of WEA.
Why bother doing this at all, you may ask? A comprehensive look at the state of the logging industry shows that it is struggling with two major issues: economic deficit and environmental harm.
In the last 10 years alone, BC has subsidized $8.17 billion to the logging industry, but has only recollected $5.32 billion back in taxes. This equates to roughly $290 million lost every year in deficits, a loss WEA will minimize, if not eliminate.
BC currently harvests around 95 million trees per year. Assuming a single tree is capable of absorbing 162 kilograms of CO2 per year, this is roughly a total of 16 million tons of CO2, an amount approximately equal to the emission rates of 3.4 million typical passenger vehicles. The industry sees 2 to 3 seedlings per harvested trees. This means that around 260 million seedlings are planted each year.
However, this isn't truly representative of the net tree gain. In the first 12 months alone, seedlings tend to only have a survival rate of 31 to 67%. Trees from years 1 to 5 don't fare much better at only 51 to 60% surviving. In all, of the 260 million plants seeded, only around 41.1 million to 104.5 million trees will make it to adulthood, which means in most scenarios, the harvested trees will not be compensated for.
As mentioned before, we all work with the government, who will be the major source of funding. WIA sold the government their services for an annual contract of $20 million.
Furthermore, WIA will receive 2% of all tax revenues collected by the government pertaining to the regulatory services. And of course, WIA will be collecting many investments from the public.
Prior to the creation of WIA, all potential employees will have worked at gaming companies run by the same operators of WIA. This business will provide some initial funding to operate off of and a server network to build an algorithm and drone network on. This business structure and timeline may seem random and arbitrary. However, there is some significant precedence regarding this model of business. Take the world's most successful and popular entrepreneur, Elon Musk.
Musk, at the age of 32, started his successful business Tesla as a mere jumping off point for his later venture, SpaceX. Tesla merely served to provide Musk with some financial stability and experience in which he could apply to SpaceX to ensure that it thrived most in the industry. Therefore, WIA will be deriving a lot of inspiration from this model. Clearly, this method proved to be widely successful, and therefore, WIA will be implementing many of the strategies Musk did.
The ultimate goal of WIA is to accomplish what Musk did and will. This is why our business has been modeled after Musk's.
Therefore, the operations of WIA can be subdivided into 5 distinct phases. Years 1 to 2, which is the preliminary study. Year 3, early efforts. Year 4, expansion. Year 5, executive action. And Year 6, globalization.
During phase 1, the first 2 years of operations, we will not operate as a company. It will instead work to provide for oncoming stages of the company. First, we will purchase 50 Agras T-30 drones amounting to $1.5 million at $30,000 per unit.
These drones will come equipped with high-resolution cameras and advanced tracking systems. This will allow them to cover 120 acres every hour, up to 800 hours every year. Therefore, the 50 drones can collectively cover 4.8 million acres by the end of the first year, amounting to 9.6 million acres by the end of phase 1.
This range may seem limited considering BC's 149 million acres of forestry. However, only around 3 to 4 million acres are dedicated to logging each year. Therefore, to make data collection as comprehensive as possible, the drones will survey all area 3 times, meaning a total of 1.6 million acres will be comprehensively analyzed.
Here is a breakdown of all operational and locational costs associated with phase 1 on a yearly basis. The total operational cost will be around 6.42 million, while the locational costs are around 1.74 million.
Phase 2, which will constitute the third year of the operation, will be for raising investments. To do so, we will develop the aforementioned app that shows preliminary data and points problem with data collected during the first phase.
With this developed app, WIA will collect funds from small investors in both BC and worldwide. Each investor, as mentioned prior, can invest anywhere from $1 to $1,000 directly through the app. And WIA is hoping to collect around $4 million in investments from 40,000 investors.
After the set amount of funding is collected, WIA will begin raising another $5 million USD from current investors and additional 20,000 new investors. This will result in a total of $9 million, allowing the company to increase the number of drones from 50 to 200, which will increase the forestry cover fourfold.
The additional 150 drones will collect and analyze data a little less comprehensively than before, allowing WIA to cover a much larger area in a smaller amount of time. Furthermore, WIA will purchase more land for data collection centers and drone charging/maintenance stations.
The total operational cost will now, for the second phase, more than double, reaching $15.45 million. Locational cost will also more than double, totaling to $4.84.
Phase 3 will constitute collaborating with interest groups and BC voters, the investors, to lobby for changes in the taxation and licensing system of logging. Also, by now, WIA will have 200 drones analyzing the activities of different companies and grading them based on their recovery capabilities. These data will then be used to determine the taxes and limits for these companies.
In phase 3, WIA will also establish $20 million contract where the government provides $20 million contract every year in exchange for WIA's outsourcing services. Further funding will come from bank loans of $6 million.
Operational costs again rise, but not significantly, rising to 21.22 million. Locational costs also increase to 5.67 million. The fourth phase will involve WIA redirecting their focus to direct environmental protection. WIA will now have its own in-house tree plantation centers to grow and cultivate trees into adulthood, later planted in heavily deforested regions.
WIA will also initiate a 15-year project known as Carbon Tax License Bill. This bill will grant WIA interventionist power over logging companies. For companies that fail to maintain carbon emissions, WIA will institute regulations on their deforestation rates. Those that successfully meet carbon emission guidelines, however, will face minimal interventions.
To be specific, companies will be granted the ability to harvest an additional 1,000 trees for every 1 ton of greenhouse gas they preserve. However, this additional number of trees will decrease over time.
Furthermore, the limits of the number of trees that are allowed to be harvested for companies will decline over time. For instance, after the first year, the limit will decrease to 98.5% of its initial amount at the start of the 15-year project. By the end of the 15 years, it will be at 77%. So during the fourth phase, the operational cost will finally fall to $15.24 million, and locational cost remains constant at $5.67 million. These costs will remain constant for all subsequent years. All plans and operations outlined thus far will be concentrated in Canada. However, the fifth phase will involve globalization.
A major component of this final phase will be the implementation of a greenhouse gas score system, GHGS, to measure an industry's carbon footprint. Industries will be imposed duties on the importing and exporting proportionally to their GHGS. This concludes the proposal for the World Environmental Agency, the profitable company for the greater good.
If you get together, we can make this possible. We appreciate your attention. Thank you for listening.
And we can do this together, seriously.